And I'm Carly Callahan. I am a new Westerlarian, I like to say. I've been here for 3 years, actually. I've owned a home here for 3 years, and I'm the executive director over at the United. And I've been doing that for 3 years and a few months now. So I'm relatively new to the community, but every day, before I get started, I have to say that I become more and more grateful to be part of this extraordinary community. It's, as many of you know, being from outside of Westerly, you do feel a little bit like an outsider, but I think as an outsider, I have such a gift of perspective because I appreciate how incredible it is to be here and to have people like you who are so invested in the history and the present and the future of this community. So I am so very grateful, and it's an honor to speak to you today. I'm here tonight to talk about historic preservation, but more specifically, I want to share why preservation has been such a personal and become such a personal passion for my family, what we learned through the restoration of our home on 12 Elm Street, and how that experience connects me to my work at the United, and my recent decision to join the board of Preserve RI. For me, preservation begins with a simple idea. We are not just owners of historic buildings, but we are stewards of them. These structures were here before us. They hold the memory of the people who built this town, worked in its industries, worshiped in its churches, and raised generations of families. Preservation is not about freezing time or living in nostalgia. It is about continuity, and it is about ensuring that the physical fabric of a place continues to tell its story. In a rapidly changing world, historic buildings provide grounding. They give communities identity, and they create a sense of belonging that cannot be replicated. So our journey on Elm Street began, as I mentioned, just now about 3.5 years ago. Elm Street, as I'm sure so many of you know, is one of the most historically significant residential streets in our area. Architectural historians have compared it to Benefit Street up in Providence because of the remarkable concentration of 19th century homes that remain intact today. Much of the street was developed in the 1830s and in the early 20th century when Westerly was growing as an industrial and civic center. Wealth generated by local manufacturing and commerce was expressed through the construction of substantial, architecturally ambitious homes along the corridor of Elm Street. And I guess it became one of the most fashionable addresses in town. Prominent families built there because of its elevated setting, its proximity to downtown and the park, of course, and its connection to schools, churches, and businesses. Walking along Elm Street today is like walking through a visual timeline of Westerly's development. You encounter Greek Revival houses from the mid-19th century, later Gothic Revival and Queen Anne homes, and early 20th century Georgian Revival residences. Together, they tell a story of changing taste, prosperity, and civic identity. The street was also central to community life. One of Westerly's earliest high school buildings, as I'm sure you know, was constructed on Elm Street in 1870, underscoring how important this neighborhood was to the town's growth. When we first encountered our home there, we understood that we were not just looking at a house, we were looking at a piece of that larger narrative. Our home was built around 1840 and is an example of Greek Revival architecture. When we purchased it, we knew we were taking on more than a renovation project. We were taking on a responsibility. And I'll do a little sidebar here in sharing that the home was not on the market. And we had someone going door to door and knocking on doors on Elm Street and saying, do you have any interest in selling your home? Because I needed to be close to the theater. I wanted to be in downtown and be like kind of embedded in the community. And the wonderful Kellys, who were the previous owners of the home, answered the door, and they had just read the article in the Westerly Sun by the wonderful Nancy Burns-Fusaro that I was taking on this role as executive director of the United. And the article, as Nancy always writes these beautiful articles, talked about our family and who we were and all the things. And as the story goes, the Kellys turned to each other and said, we read that article and we said, that's the kind of family that would appreciate a house like this. And they had been, I think, toying with the idea of being closer to their family, but they decided to sell it to us, which I think is really kind of a neat a neat story and a neat twist. So when we purchased the house, we knew we were taking on more than a renovation project. We were taking on a responsibility, because historic houses, of course, ask something different of their owners. They require patience, they require research, they require humility, and we quickly learned that we are not the author of the story, we are simply the current chapter of the story. Now, our family of 4 is the 7th owners of our home on Elm Street, and I think that that's pretty neat, and we always like to imagine what the next 7 families might look like. So there's a kind of a beautiful mythology and imagination to the process. The work involved restoring architectural details, which we'll get into in a second, strengthening the exterior envelope, addressing some structural issues, and making thoughtful decisions about how to adapt the house for contemporary living while honoring its historic character. We approached each decision in the process under the guidance of Meg Lyons, who is our architect, with a guiding question. What will allow this house to remain meaningful and viable for another 100 years? So at this point, I'm going to share the video, which will kind of bring it to life a bit more.
Elm Street is a really unique street in Westerly. It's sort of a catalog of wonderful vernacular historical architecture. All you need to do is drive down Elm Street and you'll see Greek revivals, and you'll see colonial revivals, and you'll see shingle style, and it's like a great catalog of American architecture. There are lots of houses on the street that have porches. This one has one that has these really delicate, quite beautiful Ionic capitals. And I think it's a significant house by itself, but it's also a jewel kind of on a necklace of a lot of beautiful houses, and it makes the street really special for Westerly.
This house had been built originally with the latest, highest quality materials, custom-made moldings, most of which were made right here in Westerly. By the time the current owners bought it, there had been a certain element of deferred maintenance. We did quite a lot of interior work. There was extensive electrical work. There was a bay window in the living room, and that bay window had previously had one of the windows replaced with a door. And the door didn't seem to be very appropriate, and we replaced it in kind with a window to match the other windows in the site and match the paneled woodwork to make it look like it was always there and never altered. The major sticker effect on the house was certainly what we did to the front porch, which was, it was plywood and kind of deteriorating fir decking, which was some of which was original. It was painted originally.
So we basically took down, there were 18 columns we took off the front. We had the bases all rebuilt or replicated, and some of the columns were in fine shape, some were in terrible shape, and then we rebuilt the whole substructure of the deck, and then we put on new decking, new ceiling. It was a fun project, and the Callahans were really easy to deal with and very receptive to any thoughts that any of us really had as far as to make it a better job.
When we took on this project, we understood that we're stewards of the home, and part of that responsibility is putting everything we can in terms of financial investment, but also bringing the right team on board to make sure that the home can sustain for generations to come. We're the 7th family to live on 12 Elm Street.
And one of the things that we decided when we looked at this home was to say, this is a beautiful home that's been here for 200 years. We'd love to do a restoration to this home that would enable it to be a viable structure and a beautiful statement in the community for another 100 years. And so that's always been our intent, to create something that's going to be lasting and a real testament to the integrity of the home, and also, the beautiful area that it dwells in.
It's so clear that this was built with love, with intention, and with a deliberate strategy to have this be something that it's lasting. And so we are doing everything we can to be additive to that original intention and make sure that there is true longevity and legacy here on Elm Street.
So when the project was completed, we were so honored to be in receipt, just like this organization, in receipt of a Rotary Award. And that was a wonderful way to, certainly recognize, and I can't take, nor can my husband take any credit for the actual work, because it was the people who did this really thoughtful, intentional rehabilitation of the house. But the intention with the Rhodey Award was to hopefully catalyze, thought about how important it is to have preservation as part of the contemplation and the conversation as we look at other restoration efforts, and hope that it might inspire others to undertake similar projects. I believe that historic preservation is contagious in the best possible way. One restored home can change a block, and several restored homes can transform a street. And over time, that momentum can help shape the identity of an entire area. The coverage that was received as a result of this also noted that we placed an emphasis on ensuring the structural longevity of the house. Preservation is more than just aesthetics and the fun stuff. It's about durability and stewardship, and making sure, as we noted in the video, that the house will be a home for another 100 years and hopefully beyond. And in the course of the renovation, we learned several important lessons. First, that preservation builds connections. Neighbors stop to talk. I get invited to wonderful gatherings like this one to talk about the project. And what's really neat is people will just come up and share memories of the house. And that happens on a relatively regular basis. With the wonderful Pops in the Park concert, a lot of people, as you know, park at the Baptist Church. And now 2 years in a row, when walking back, people were walking up our driveway, and I have grandchildren from one of the owners that were telling me about how at Christmas time their grandparents would decorate the Christmas tree in the front room and close the big pocket doors and do the big reveal every Christmas morning. And there's just a lot of wonderful stories that come to life, and we're just so happy to be in receipt of those. I believe historic preservation strengthens local identity. When historic homes are cared for, entire neighborhoods feel rooted and intentional. I believe that preservation is in fact an investment, not only financially, but socially and culturally. It supports walkability, tourism, civic pride, and intergenerational continuity. And Elm Street continues to demonstrate how thoughtful restoration enhances both the physical environment and the sense of place. And to me, that's the most important thing, right? That sense of place is something that we can't artificially and quickly reproduce. It's something that was generated generations ago and gradually grows and takes hold and is deeply rooted. And as I mentioned, my passion for preservation also is very present in my professional life. As executive director of the United, I have the privilege every day of working in another historic building that was brought back to life through community effort and support. Of course, as many of you know, the United opened as a vaudeville theater in 1926, became a cinema, and then in '86 went dormant and was reimagined as what it is today. So, and in my work there, I'm always struck by how places of historical significance, and it doesn't have to be fancy, but a place that has been part of a community carries with it such emotional memory. And so many people come into the United and have balcony stories. And some of them are rated, R and above. But it's, people will say, this is where my first kiss was, or I used to throw popcorn at the screen, or my grandfather was a ticket taker. And I think that place uniquely catalyzes those memories. When we get rid of the physicality, it's very hard, I think, for the imagination to just carry those memories forward. The physicality allows us to have that stimulus that allows us to tell the stories and connect with one another. So as I mentioned, because of all of this, I recently joined the board of Preserve RI, which, as so many of you know, I'm sure, works to advocate for historic buildings and landscapes, support preservation projects, and raise awareness about the importance of safeguarding our shared heritage. And most importantly, it helps communities maintain a sense of place in a rapidly changing world. And my closing thoughts are, here we are living in this time of extraordinary technological transformation. I spend a lot of time in my professional life thinking about this, grappling with this, and trying to understand how we can protect the integrity of our communities and our connections with one another. in this really disruptive time. In moments like this, I believe that physical places matter even more. Historic buildings are providing continuity, and they remind us that communities are built over generations. They offer authenticity, and authenticity, I think, is becoming one of our most valuable cultural resources that we have. Preservation is ultimately an act of optimism. And so is, by the way, writing letters to people for 100 years from now. It reflects a belief that the past still has something to teach us and that the future is worth building with intention. So I thank you so much for your time. I hope that that was a glimpse into the work that we did on 12 Elm Street. I'm happy to try to answer any questions, although technically speaking, as I said, I was cheering along and supporting the work, but I certainly can't take credit for any of the craftsmanship. But if anyone ever wants to stop in and see the home, please just knock on I'm usually not there, but go to the United and say, come back home. It'll give me an excuse to leave the office and show you around. Yes?
You said that you're joining the board of Preserve RI. Mm-hmm. Will they, I feel sick about a house that was torn down that was historical.
Yep.
In Avondale, and you probably know which one. Well, there are a couple, but one was really old and should have been torn down. And will they have any clout like that? I used to live in Wickford. I had an antique house that was 1804, and I wasn't allowed to touch a window without permission.
Right.
I don't know, will Preserve RI help us, or do we need the Historical Society or the Preservation Society here to be more?
Well, I just had a Zoom on this very topic because there's another demolition that is happening soon that has been approved, and I connected someone who is very concerned about that with Preserve RI. They are going to get involved in terms of letters of support and trying to, make sure that they can do whatever they can in terms of advocacy to at least put a stay on some of these actions until they're more further explored. It's kind of speaking delicately around this, but in a more tangible way, I'm working to have an event here in Westerly in the summer where Preserve RI can come down and talk about the work that they're doing and the resources that they have, not just in terms of advocacy, but financial support and connections with the right people in the state. And I'm a new Rhode Islander, so forgive me for not knowing the ins and outs, but to be able to give people a toolbox, at least an awareness that if they have a project that they are concerned about, that there are resources in the state to help with advocacy. And one of the pieces that they're going to put together for this event, which I think is going to be in maybe mid-June, is really quantifying the economic value of preservation as well. I think preservation is often seen as something that is not accessible and for the privileged few, but Preserve RI, and again, I'm brand new to the board, but my understanding is that they're really working to help, have financial resources and also say to communities like ours, if you make the investment in preservation, the result of that will help you, not just in terms of the aesthetic and the beauty and the community, all these things that I was talking about, but also in terms of the economic health and vitality of the community.
So is the Elm Street area a designated historic district?
My understanding is that it is a historic district, but there are no protections that come with that. Like there is, and again, this is me as a new Westerlarian, so, take it with a grain of salt. My understanding is that we could have bought that house and torn it down the next day with no problem, and I moved from Madison, Connecticut, and we had a house that was, it was not a historic home, but it was in a historic district, and we did a renovation on that house. And the hoops that we had to jump through in terms of the width and the number of, for an oval window that we were putting in was like crazy. I mean, it was, and I'm not saying that that's good either, by the way, but I couldn't believe when we moved with this project that it was all, up to us, and we were trying to do the right thing and, maintain the integrity and all the things. But no, my understanding is that there's no negative repercussions to someone who wants to just buy and knock down and build, whatever. And please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm sure you all know better. But yeah.
There's property ownership rights, and the owner of the property, unless there's something that blocks it. This 1734 museum is protected by a legal trust. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. That does not protect the property.
Really?
Even being on the National Register, you can tear it down.
It's local.
Now, we can't tear this one down because it's under a legal Rhode Island trust.
Okay.
The Orlando Raymond Smith Trust. It was put in that trust in the 1920s. But people think if it's on the National Register, it's protected.
But it's not.
So,
And my hope with this event in June is that that's kind of the intention of it. And places like Wickford, there must be many, many, many cases in Rhode Island, in our tiny little state, of case studies and examples of preservation doing good, not just again.
Do you know if the pillars on your house are original?
They are. Now, okay, I should amend that. The house was built in 1840. I think that those pillars were a bump out in that porch from the original house. But when the pillars were put in place, the columns, those are the original columns. But we're not sure when they were put in place. I think that the house was probably, that was an addition, maybe turn of the century. But they were, and they needed to go to what I called column rehab. Because they needed to be completely taken down. And the good news is, I think, as a community, is that when the columns came down and we had the supports up, people were horrified because they thought we were taking the columns down forever. And I wanted to have a little posting or PSA outside saying, never fear, they're in column rehab. They'll be back. I don't know how long it's going to take, but they are original. And in fact, one of them was so beyond repair that we had to reposition. We couldn't fix it. And you can't, go to Rings End and buy a column like that, right? So we said we're going to keep the original, and we repositioned a few of them so that it looks symmetrical, but it's actually missing one column from the original house.
I thought one was missing.
Yeah. I should have a big light on that, where it was.
Just one more.
Yeah.
What would you say was the most challenging part of that project?
Well, I think frankly, there was a ton of knob and tube, which I don't know if anyone here has dealt with knob and tube and horsehair plaster. Knob and tube is old electric that's buried in the wall. And we had to go in and get into that horsehair plaster. I'm using the royal we. The house was a mess because a lot of that electric and that knob and tube needed to be extricated. So that was, the fun parts of it, the columns and bringing it back to the original white and getting rid of the plywood and putting down Ipe on the deck. That was the fun part. But a historic home has a lot of inherited structural things. But I will say when the storm comes and the wind blows, that house sits there with I've never lived in such a solid house before. And the basement has these huge blocks of granite. I think it would make, by the way, an incredible soupy cellar. But, you can just see how these houses were built with such permanence and integrity. So even though it's old and even though, it's gone through all the things it's gone through, the core integrity gave us confidence that even though it was messy with the horsehair and everything else, who cares, because they don't make them like they used to, so it was worth it.
All the electrical replaced?
We rewired mostly all of it, yeah. I mean, there's no more knob and tube. Our electrician was you would have thought we had the devil living in our house. He was obsessed with getting out the knob and tube, and when we did. How long was this? It was about 10 months, maybe. That's all. So it wasn't too bad. And there's more to go. That stairs, the banisters, and the rails, they all need to be rehabbed. I mean, we just took the exterior envelope of the house and worked on that first because there was a lot of rot. So we wanted to. That was getting to the point of no return The interior, as you saw, is in pretty good shape, but it needs help too. But we're just like, that can kind of, we can chip away when we're not paying for college tuitions, you know?
I was wondering, I think a walking tour of the house.
I think it would be so neat to do a walking tour, and I have this fantasy of doing like a holiday stroll, you know, where people could open up their homes and you have wassail and you go in and you know, I think it would be so neat. And I'm so curious, as someone who lives there, I sure would love to take a peek into some of these houses, you know? So,
does the garage still have the turntable?
It does. So it doesn't, it's so cool. The garage, it's a 3-car garage. And in the garage, there's this huge round, like what's the thing called? A Lazy Susan? It's like a Lazy Susan in the garage, because the cars would be able to come into the garage, but they weren't able to back out. So there was a hydraulic thing on the side that would turn it around. Now, the hydraulic thing definitely doesn't work, but how cool.
The wife either couldn't or wouldn't back the car out. That's why he put that in.
That is so cool. Yeah, and I'm a producer of theatrical things, and I want to like do a show in there. Yeah. Little details like that, and I mean, and I could go on and on about Elm Street, and I promise I won't, but what's neat about the house is that the 2 owners ago, the guy was very involved with Yale University, and there was a demolition at Yale of a dorm that this gentleman had lived in, and he went down there and he took out some of the hardware of the Yale dorm, and now it's in the bathrooms in our house. And when we had to reconstruct, as our contractor mentioned, we had to take out a door and put in a window. There is a repository of old moldings from the Ocean House. And so he grabbed the moldings from there. So we have a little bit of the Ocean House as our window moldings, which I think is pretty. So the house is a little bit of a Frankenhouse, but I think it's neat how it has like parts of all of these random wild things. So it's cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for letting me talk.